Hey, what's up? Serena here from thriftiving.com. So today we are going to be making this cute, amazing wall-hung herb garden. That's right, you can use it outside when it's nice, but guess what? It's so portable that when it gets cold, you can bring it inside. And it's not just me building this. I've got 3 boys who are going to be helping me. So grab your kids, grab these tools and supplies, and let's get gardening. For this project, the most important tools and materials you'll need will be a 2-foot by 4-foot piece of sanded plywood. You'll need about 3 to 4 feet of PVC piping, and that's 4 inches in width, seeds or plants, a handsaw, a miter saw, a circular saw, lots of saws, paint, drill bits, and drivers, and you will need some basic materials and supplies, which you can find down below. Now, this is a great opportunity to teach kids how to use tools they've never had to measure before. So get them involved in the measuring, but leave the heavy-duty cutting to the adults. We're going to start with 2 8-inch pieces. This is going to make up the front and the back of the vertical herb garden. For the back piece, cut it the full length of the plywood, but for the front piece, make it 3 inches shorter at 45 inches long. Now for the side pieces of the herb garden, initially we measured and cut 2 3-inch pieces, but realized that was a little bit too wide, so I trimmed it down to 1.5 inches and made them also 48 inches long. We ended up with 6 pieces because we needed 2 end pieces, so 6 pieces with one being a little bit shorter. Now it was time to do the sanding. Once you smooth the boards, test fit them to make sure that they all fit together nicely. Next, you're going to mark the location of where all the wood comes together. These are the areas that we want to tape off. The inside of the herb garden will be varnished. This is to resist moisture, but we don't want to varnish the parts that will be glued together in case the varnish affects the glue. You'll apply 1 coat of weather-resistant varnish to all of the inside areas of the herb garden using a natural bristled brush. But you're only going to want to apply this to the inside, not the outside. And don't forget, you have to remove the tape before it dries. Now it's time to glue. Now this is another great opportunity to get kids involved, letting them place the glued pieces into place. You want to glue up the back, the sides, and the ends and clamp to hold it. Now remember, you have to remove any excess glue that squeezes out with a wet towel. While the base of the herb garden is drying, it's time to move on to cutting the PVC piping. I found that using a miter box was helpful in determining where to make that 45-degree cut. You can also use a rafting square. Mark the 45-degree angle and then cut the PVC. Now you have several ways you can do this. You can use a handsaw, a miter saw, a jigsaw, and some other choices. We chose a combination of handsaws and a miter saw. Now, if you use a handsaw, you will get your workout. Once it's cut, measure from the curved edge 2 3/4 inches, and then you're going to make a straight 90-degree cut. This is the planter, and you will need 4 of these. You can actually use a miter saw to cut the 90-degree. Keep in mind that this is a 10-inch miter saw. It did not go all the way through to finish the cut, so you may have to rotate it and then finish the cut. It will leave some raw edges when you're using the handsaw, when you're using the miter saw, so keep in mind that you will need an orbital sander or some sandpaper to clean that up. I found that the orbital sander worked really well, but if you have a belt sander, that actually was the quickest way to clean up those edges. Now it's time to prep the front panel of the herb garden. The first thing is to determine where they're going to be placed and making sure that they're straight and they're evenly spaced. So once you've got that figured out, they're in place, trace around them and mark on the bottom edge of the planter which one goes where. You don't want to mix them up. Trace the inside too, because the inside tracing will help to determine where the drainage holes will be placed. Mark the location of the drainage holes right over top of that inside tracing. You can use any small drill bit, just don't go too small and don't go too large. Now to drill the drain holes, they need to be slanted so that the water can easily drain. So start drilling straight up and then slowly lean the drill in the direction of the top of the herb garden until the drill bit goes all the way through. The next step is optional, but I thought it might be helpful to place screening on the inside of the front panel over the drainage holes. This is to prevent large chunks of soil from falling through the holes. Use a heavy-duty stapler and staple it into place. Now that the front panel has drainage holes and the locations for the planters have been traced, we can glue and secure the front panel of the body to the herb garden. Again, remember to wipe up any excess glue with a wet towel and use clamps to secure it while it dries. You definitely need pilot holes so that you don't split or crack your wood. Drill pilot holes first And then I'm going to use something called a countersink bit that will allow the screw to sit beneath the surface of the wood. You don't have to use this, but it is a great way to hide those screws. Speaking of which, these are 1 1/4 exterior screws. These are not going to rust over time. This is what you want to use. Place them about 12 inches apart in the front and back panel. Next, place tape over the opening of the planters to prevent spray paint from going inside. This is where the soil and plants will be. You don't want spray paint in there. Use scissors to trim off the excess tape. And because of the black writing on the PVC pipe, you'll probably need several coats of spray paint with primer if you're going to go with a white color like me or a light color. But let them dry to the touch in between, and then make sure that you let them thoroughly dry overnight. And while they're drying, we can get started on painting this herb garden. You want to use an exterior paint since your herb garden will be spending time outdoors. And if you've got wood filler, now's a good time to use it to hide the screws, apply it, sand it down so it's smooth. I didn't have any, so later I'll use caulk, but you'll need probably just 1 or 2 coats of paint. When you get to the front of the herb garden, leave the areas where the planters will be unpainted. And the reason why is because we don't want paint leaching into the soil. And we also want to make sure that the glue has a really good adhesion to the wood. And here's a little tip. Be sure to match up the planter to the position that you previously placed them in. Then turn the planter over, use an adhesive around the slanted rim of the planter, and then position it back into place. You want to wipe up any excess glue, and again, make sure that it's straight, make sure that it's even, and we're going to let this dry overnight, 24 hours, before we move on to the next step. As I previously mentioned, if you don't have wood filler, paintable caulk is an excellent way to hide screws as well as sealing up any gaps where those planters meet the wood. Just make sure to paint over that caulk once it dries. This next step is optional. I use my vinyl cutting machine to make a stencil that says herbs, but you can use any stencil with alphabets. Do 2 coats of paint, remove that stencil while it's still wet, and if you've got any bleeding, use a small paintbrush to clean up the lettering. You'll need a way to hang your herb garden. I personally love the look of rope, so to do this, you'll need 2 D-rings with pilot holes and exterior screws and a little bit of rope. I found some instructions online for how to tie something called a bowline knot, and I did one on each side. It wasn't really that difficult, and once it was secure, I trimmed off the excess rope, and I was ready to move on to the next step. This part is perfect for doing with kids, even though it can be super messy. You'll need some stones to put in the bottom of the planters for drainage, and we actually found some river rocks in our yard. Place about a handful into each planter, and then fill up with maybe 1 to 2 scoops of soil. Now for our herb garden, we're mostly using pre-grown plants from the Home Depot, but I did pick up a bunch of seeds for the kids to toss in. It is a really great lesson in biology for the kids. They had fun. Once everything was planted, we had peppermint, chives, sage. I had one more thing that I needed to make, and that was a drip tray. So I made this tray and added a knob that I had lying around so that any soil or water that drips down will hopefully be caught by the drip tray, and the inside is varnished. So what started as a 4-inch wide piece of PVC pipe is now this cute little herb garden. Guys, I love this. I can use it outside when it's nice out, but then, as the temperatures start to cool in the fall, you can bring this right inside. And because it's small, it's kind of narrow, it's only 8 inches wide, you don't need a lot of wall space to hang this up to have a year-long garden. So if you like this project, be sure to like it and subscribe, leave a comment, let me know what you think. Come back again because we're doing amazing things here at Thrift Diving. Be safe, and I will see you next project.